Hi, Richard Brook, Acupuncture and Yoga teacher here, and this afternoon in my blog I'm going to talk a little bit about relationships. Now, not the relationships we have with one other person, I'll talk about that some other time, but more our connection with natural rhythms and natural laws of nature, if you like. What I was particularly thinking of though is situations such as sometimes in our work where we get pulled into almost like a certain culture and a certain way of being which bucks the trend of our relationship to natural rhythms, and yeah, in effect then it creates, it can create a chronic degree of imbalance. And so you might have a situation where your alignment is being pulled right off centre because your work situation is demanding of you, an excessive amount of work. Now, I know it's not always as easy as thinking, okay, I'll quit and get another job, but it's almost like if you're so lost in that story of feeling that's the only way for it to be, then you really are in trouble. Now, I found that my way out of a lot of unhealthy lifestyle patterns earlier on in my life was to understand how the natural model, or how laws of nature actually operate, like the laws of Yin and Yang, that expansive movement and activity has to be balanced by passivity and rest. And there's organs in the body that are responsible for both of these movements. So there's organs that are responsible in the body for driving you out into the world, and there's also organs which need to rest in order to replenish and revitalise. A bit like how, the polarities of summer and winter, I talk about this quite a lot, that the kind of rest of winter balances the activity of summer, and night time, balances the effects of daytime, if you want, and vice versa. And so both these aspects of you, both these aspects of your consciousness and aspects of your body need to be getting this kind of balance. And so when you're in a job which chronically pulls you into excess, it will create an imbalance within your physiology. And I know in the past I often used to think of it as kind of borrowing from the invisible energy bank, I used to call it. I used to just think, okay, one more time, maybe I'll work to excess one more time. But what you need to do, you need to start, like I said, is kind of building a new awareness of what model you're working towards. And it might not happen overnight, but by doing so it can help you to move towards something much healthier in the future. Like I said, 'cause if you're just getting pulled in your job and your work into a chronic situation of excessive stress because you've never considered a vaster perspective, you're going to end up at some point suffering from, stress symptoms and really struggling to be living, or living significantly below your potential. And so what I would advise doing, other than actually coming to see me, because that way you get access to all this lovely information, is actually getting out and having a think about some of these things that I'm talking about, laws of nature, yin and yang, and just thinking for a while, how is the balance of your life, and who are you aligning to? Like, what forces are you aligning to? Are you aligning to your own natural rhythms and tendencies, or are you being pulled in by one structure to align yourself too much with them, so it's pulling you off your centre? And the other aspect of relationship that I'd like to talk about as well, and again I mention this quite often, is your relationship to doing things which are kind of integral to you. And I often talk about the idea of soul. And I know that, people often use this phrase of saying, oh, I found my calling. And when I talk a lot about soul, I suppose you could equate it to that if you want. I tend to think that all of us have got a kind of predisposed tendencies or predisposed things that we're just unique to us in this life, that are good for us to do, and they're going to uplift you and give you a sense of power and a sense of strength and a sense of confidence. And a little bit when we're younger, it can be a bit of a mission. It's like we're stumbling around in the dark sometimes. And there's often this idea, especially before people go to uni, that you're meant to know what you're going to do, and you're meant to have a clear perspective. But really at that age, quite often, you're looking for clues as much as anything. So you might be doing certain jobs and trying to think, does this work, does this not? And as you get a little bit older, it becomes a bit more refined. And what I've personally found is when you get towards your 30s a little bit more, you're kind of narrowing down and much more fine-tuning kind of what's integral to you and what makes you tick. And it's staying in relationship to that, which again gives you your strength. And I'd avoid, if you can help it, staying away from situations where I almost call it like the antidote dynamic, where you're perhaps so not enjoying what you're doing in your life that then the rest of your time, your hobby time and rest time has to be spent filling it with antidotes to the stress. Yeah, it's just not a very creative way to be, you know, and you're kind of firefighting all the time. And the only way really to find yourself is to actually spend time with yourself. You know, again, a lot of the time we spend a lot of time distracting ourselves with whatever it might be, TV, you know, I've done it. I had long chunks of my time actually when I was younger. And, you know, I used to find it a little bit difficult to sit within myself and within my own consciousness. And I was, you know, sometimes a bit lonely, so I go home and find myself distracting myself, TV, laptop, whatever. But start building in some windows in your week which make you spend time with yourself. And it can be a little bit awkward because the further off target you're going, the more awkward it can actually be to spend time within your own consciousness. You know, and you tend to get a rhythm and an inner energy of dissatisfaction and stress when you're not doing what you're meant to do. So when you get that time on your own, you hear a little bit of that energy in you talking to you and saying, you know, look, I'm not happy, I'm stressed. But you're not really going to get anywhere unless you start to listen to it. And I often think this as well. You know, sometimes we might be lost, and I see this a lot with my patients. Let's imagine you're going for a walk and you're completely lost somewhere, and you start to create a real physiological response of stress, you know, dis-ease within your body. Say you're lost in some woods. Now you can be lost in those woods and you can turn very slightly to one direction or realise the direction you're meant to go in, and all of a sudden you start to feel so much better. And that's even without particularly moving anywhere. And so I see this with my patients, and I also see it in myself sometimes. If I've been going in the wrong direction, all you have to do is start heading the right way, and it creates a whole different response. Again, imagine that little analogy that you're lost somewhere, you suddenly realise where you're meant to go, and you feel much better. And maybe some people might, you know, in Western medicine, they might liken this to some kind of placebo effect. But the reality is as individuals, we need to feel like we're navigating in our right direction in life. Because when we don't, we feel stressed and unhappy.